My name is death and the end is here.
Hello and welcome to What's Up Punk, where we take a look at the myriad of subgenres underneath the umbrella of punk. Today we'll be taking a look at Dreadpunk. Time is not a linear line, it's concentric circles. It repeats on itself. Once for 25 cents, you could buy thrills and chills of murder and monsters, most foul, between the printed pages of sequential storytelling. Hosted by the Crypt Keeper, Dear Uncle Creepy, the biblical Cain and Abel, and even Elvira.
And until then, this is Elvira, the gal who put the boob back in the boob tube, saying, unpleasant dreams.
Earlier for a copper in old London town, you could get stories of Spring Hill Jack, Varney the Vampire, toward stories of sex, violence, and of course, always the blood. Apropos, as it is man's nature, yes, his very blood, to seek out the dark. Walk on the nastier side of things with the night creatures, because you're not supposed to. Because it's wrong and it feels so good. Or maybe, just maybe, we're night creatures as well. Proceed with caution. Here, ghosts are real. Don't question it. The real question is, why might you be haunted? What is Dreadpunk? As its nomenclator, Derek Tantum, director of Dragon's Con's Horror Tracks, coined it, contemporary gothic horror work set in an often stylized past. Well, contemporary as the 90s to the 2010s, and to now. The name itself is not derived from the foreboding sense of dread, but from the Penny Dreadfuls. Yeah, that's a fun fact, I'm actually saying it correctly. Penny Dreadful isn't like a magazine that actually existed that was well known for having horror stories in it. It was a pejorative term for magazines like that, the Penny Dreadfuls, that were popular in the Victorian era. So that's the name of the game. Gothic horror set in around the 19th century, but made nowish with modern techniques and skills. The general consensus says the beginning point of all this was Coppola's Dracula. Dreadpunk is self-aware and subversive while still emphasizing classic horror traditions. Gaslight fantasies, chilling tales of ghosts and haunted mansions, the macabre stories of ruthless killers stalking dark streets a la Jack the Ripper or H.H. Holmes. Vampires, scientists most mad. All with a sense of darkness and lack of positivity, period pieces, gothic horror created by modern writers and filmmakers are the hallmarks of Dreadpunk. Technology. Not really a focus, like I said before, in the contemporary sense. It's just stories of madmen like H.H. Holmes. Not so fun fact, you know the murder castle and Holmes selling the cadavers to medical schools of his victims to cover it up? Total bunk. He owned a hotel, but that was just like his day job. As for the cadaver exchange, grave robbing. Reality's boring. Anyway, other than sensationalized stories of murders, we have gaslight fantasies. Chilling tales of ghosts, haunted mansions. However, it's not just dark steampunk. Steampunk get dark all on its own, but is typically emphasizing technology with a focus on advancing progress through the late Victorian aesthetic. It generally has a more optimistic viewpoint. While Dreadpunk has more, ghosts, monsters, spirit mediums, and possession, not airship and gears. It's also not necrotech, aka what if the necromancers won and made a union? As when walking corpses usually show up, it's literally Frankenstein or
a real fucking vampire
aesthetic. Just so many baddies. Couple of those weren't even main characters. Also, a lot of Johnny Depp. And was once gothic horror's great white hope, Johnny Silverhand.
Yes, of course, sir. If I may inquire, what in fact happened to Mr. Renfield in Transylvania?
I kid. I mean Harry Potter.
What are you doing to me? Listen to me. You are not a hunchback.
The Splatterpunks of yore rebelled against censors of the past with blood and bone cracking. It wasn't enough to see the shadow behind the door, to hear it go boo. They reveled in their works of inflicting the same evil the monster pressed on their victims. I don't want to give you the wrong idea. We're not dealing with a shadow behind the door. However, don't expect the same level of carnage. I mean, don't expect none. It is Dreadpunk, after all.
This is Judge Dredd. I am the law.
You have no idea how long I've been fighting using that clip. I'm awful. I don't know why you guys watch me.
She's almost dead.
She's dead enough.
Gothic horror is built on dread, slow builds, and excruciating pacing, unreliable narrators, classic monsters, and yes, plenty of London fog. Going back to what I said about baddies, a common trope of this genre is fighting against 19th century status quo. Hey Watson Casca, how are you doing? Instead of helpless women being the victims of monsters and villains, they often are the heroines. Dreadpunk keeps an old punk adage alive. We may not win, but we're not going to lose either. Don't be surprised the punk heroine may beat the devil at its own game, only to lose what she was questing for. Edith escapes Sharp Manor and its dark history, but she does not come out unscathed. To save your own soul, you must kill the one man that would cross oceans of time and blood for you. Kill a daughter to save a surrogate one. We all want to see our honored dead again, but the price for the means in which we find them is always high. Conspiracies abound between the living and the dead, and true monsters could be either. The true horrors of Victorian times were fueled by new and old forms of authority, be they the cruel capitalism of industrial revolution or the monarchy. Dreadpunk uses horror to assert these authorities like From Hell, or Sleepy Hollow 2 if you're feeling frisky. A no friggin' way could be real theory on old gentleman Jack being an instrument of the royal family cleaning up a mess only to be bug nuts and a Freemason, turning his hit into a statement.
The city was drowning in decay. Chaos. Immorality. A message needed to be sent. Etched in blood for all the world to see.
Also an opium psychic, because London, baby. On the fashion side of things, we have Edwardian fashion. Women wore dresses and tailored suit dresses. Those who could afford it chose elegant fabrics such as silk, satin, or chiffon. High lace collars topped with long sleeve tops that were often heavy and embellished. And of course, fancy hats. In resistance to mainstream style, French designer Paul Poiret created corset-free dresses that draped in loose straight lines down the body. Men generally wore three-piece suits, jacket, trousers, waistcoats, vest, you know the deal, with high frown collars, white shirts, neckties, and sack suits. On the architecture side of things, we have fine buttresses, thick walls made of ambitious design, grand vaulted ceilings, aka elaborate pointy architecture, of course tall rooms with lots of light and fresh air. The streets you'll find more sallow, more grungier than a traditional Victorian tale or steampunk. Everything a bit grimy, everything a bit darker, everything a bit dirtier. How it actually was at the time during the Industrial Revolution? Probably kinda, but still stylized. Where did Dreadpunk start? At DragonCon 2015. Apologies if I get this wrong. Writer Linné Renée Hibber asked for a term for her genre about a darker side of Victorian-based horror that rubs just up against steampunk, like her Strangely Beautiful series. DragonCon's horror track director, Derek Tantum, created the perfect name. Dreadpunk. Real life Dreadpunks. Christmas? Weirdly enough? Okay, yeah, Victorian Christmas tales with supernatural elements ain't odd.
I mean, that's like meeting Charles Dickens and he's surrounded by ghosts at Christmas.
Well,
Oh, come on!
They're events meant to bring together people who would choose Edward Scissorhands or Krampus over a Christmas story without skipping a beat. And in a rare instance, I've actually been to one of these events, at the Dickens Fair at the Cow Palace, back in the pre-dark ages of 2019. Ran with some vampires. They may not drink wine, but they can sure as hell put away the absinthe.
we should get a Christmas tree, should we not?
We can have the boys come over to decorate.
Check out the Insta to find me as a vampire. It's one of the last shots of me before I joined the Faceless Mob. My recommendations. Crimson Peak. This movie should be so much more loved, but I understand why it's not. Though an absolute master of his craft, somewhere along the line, Del Toro forgot how to not light scenes. Everything is just too, well, lit. And again, I get it. These are all money shots. The Sharp estate looks bioorganic, the red clay running through the house like it's bleeding. The crimson horror, the basement. The basement is a grotesque kind of beauty. The rotten heart at the center of the story. Damn, it is so damn beautiful, and not at all scary. Anyway, shock of all shocks, Mia plays a rebellious girl not keeping with the standards of her time, and Tom plays a darkly charming man that could woo a satellite out of orbit with just smolder.
I'm Tom Hiddleston. I know you are. I'm sorry. I just got lost in your eyes. Okay. There we are. Thank you, Tom Hiddleston.
She starts out writing a ghost story.
It's not. It's more story with the ghost in it.
Mm-hmm.
The ghost is just a metaphor
A metaphor?
for the past.
But is also a spirit medium. And well,
You best start believing in ghost stories, Miss Turner. You're in one.
can she survive the Crimson Peak with her life and love intact? Watch the movie and find out.
Edith, our very own Jane Austen, though she died a spinster.
Actually, Mrs. McMichael, I would prefer to be Mary Shelley. She died a widow.
Sleepy Hollow. This movie is way better than I remember. I swear I have a memory of Crane running back to London when science fails him, only to be retrieved by Katrina to save Sleepy Hollow. Is it in keeping with the source material? No. Is it a sexy, bloody, wild ride? Hell yes. Inspector Jonathan Crane is tasked with using his new
science
to solve a rash of beheadings and prove its superiority over London's dark age policing, aka torture. Yeah, science really doesn't help against an undead demon horseman unless you go full Ash Williams. Surrounded by a literal bevy of smoke shows, one being a white witch, Crane must stop the Headless Horseman rampage and discover the answer to why he is back from the dead. Coppola's Bram Stoker's No, not this one. This one. Largely nothing really has changed from the switchover, but the art is done by Hellboy artist Mike Mignola.
I hate those comic books. They never get the eyes right.
But it does get a +5 to its friggin' awesome modifier, and it loses Silverhand's non-accent. Also, something that just has never been transferred well from the book to the screen. For those that have read it, the original Dracula is basically a book equivalent to found footage film, a collection of diary entries and messages, and it just works better in a printed medium. Both the movie and the comic are very good and worth a watch or read. I won't go into the nitty-gritty because it's Dracula. You know Dracula.
We've got Dracula lunchboxes. Did you see those? There's bobbleheads, keychains. We've got just about anything. Even vampire vibrators.
Unlike some of my colleagues, I like Coppola's interpretation of Mina's and Dracula's relationship with her being a reincarnation of his wife. It actually gives her a purpose in the story instead of just being a prize to be won or a damsel in distress. Just her connection to him and the darkness pulling her into a direction she knows she shouldn't go, even if destiny's at play. It's interesting. Comic book or movie, this is a great outing for Vlad Tepes, the Dracul, the dragon, the king of all vampires.
You think you can destroy me? You're mine.
What happened to Dreadpunk? So goths are still very much a thing. There's a new Anne Rice series. Why haven't I heard about Dreadpunk before? I asked that very question to Derek Tantum in a DM. It was created tongue-in-cheek to describe the new wave of new gothic horror that we were seeing around a decade ago, but it petered out. Why did it peter out? I'm not sure, Derek said. Pain Drivel started off great, but dropped the ball in its second and especially third season. True, I had an absolute disgusting crush on Ava Green back in the day, and it could not keep me watching. Crimson Peak failed commercially even though it's a good movie. I think there are waves that come and go. There was a big wave of it in the 90s, with Coppola's Dracula, Branagham's Frankenstein, Burton's Sleepy Hollow, etc., etc. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see another round in a couple of years. On screen maybe, as with the Penny Dreadful days, Dreadpunk is still alive and well in books. Deadstreams Volume 2, or Dreadpunk Tales of the Dark and Supernatural, a sequel to an anthology to the first Deadstream published in 2021. And many others. There is something to be said about coming back around again. Mary Morning of Autumn Moon Enchantment blog observed that every 30 years it has a re-emergence and gathers a mainstream following. First was the 30s. This was the decade of all those wonderful gothic books like Bram Stoker's Dracula and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, were turned into movies by Universal. So gothic culture became mainstream and created legendary movie stars like Bela Lugosi
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
And Boris Karloff. Next up was the 60s with Hammer Horror, reviving Gothic horror by reinventing the classic monsters for a new generation. Roger Corman and Vincent Price were also churning out dark goth movies like Crazy, based on an Edgar Allan Poe story. New legends were created like Vincent Price.
I'm going to give the people what they want. Sensation, horror, shock. Send them out in the streets to tell their friends how wonderful it is to be scared to death.
Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. By the 90s, Gothic culture had turned up to 11. We had the 80s Batcavers.
I'm old school death rock. You know, I used to go to the Batcave when Nick Fiend was still the doorman. Yes!
And goth had their own music genre and fashion style in movies like Stoker's Dracula and Interview with a Vampire. Bringing us to the 2020s. And... just saying, the Dreadpunk may rise once more. How do I feel about Dreadpunk? I so want to like this one. Largely I do. It helps that certain parts of my TikTok and Insta are a meme.
You can't keep following every single goth girl you see on this app. Your For You page is starting to look like a Spencer's gift store or a Hot Topic.
And if this was more like Deathgasm, about goths of now being in a modern gothic story, it would delight me. This just doesn't. Now, in no way am I saying this is bad, and I encourage anyone seeing this video to watch these movies. Go back even further. Stop this video. It's hammer time. They may not be Dreadpunk, but they are classics. Sign-up question. Why has no one done an adaptation of Varney the Vampire? One could make the argument that VTV is the first modern vampire. If not gaze, enhanced strength, puncture wounds on the neck, none of that was well known till this Penny Dreadful. Now, the obvious answer is Dracula. He has the name recognition, so he gets adapted over and over again. Yeah, but that's why you adapt Varney. Deviation from canon events in a well-known character isn't traditionally well received. However, a character that is not well known can be a bit looser. Personally, I play with how you're not really sure till like midway to the end of the story if Varney is a real vampire. Or just crazy. Have the idea that he isn't a vampire, just cray, is a coping mechanism he's developed to do the terrible things necessary to survive as a vampire. Just my thoughts. Put down in the comments why Varney has been left to do just cameos, and not a main character, or what you would do with him. Get a discussion going. Well, this has been What's Up Punks. As it is October, invite the dead in out of the cold. Dress like you're on your way to a funeral. Someone's probably dying somewhere, so it's appropriate. But keep on being a no-good, dirty punk. You know it, you love it, here's the spiel, let's do it. Hit subscribe to be my subscriber. Hit the bell to get notifications, and hit like to appease the algorithm gods. All fear and praise. Another whatever YouTubes, I'm probably not going to make any money off these videos, so be so kind. Check out the GoFundMe and Patreon. Links in the description.